In the studio right now is Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective, and we need to talk about this new government initiative. It is the soft justice system, which strikes me as rather extraordinary. It sounds a bit like a Crook's Charter. It means that for a number of offences which will be ruled minor, you'll get off with a caution. You won't go to court. We're talking about drug possession. We're talking about shoplifting, which has, of course, been a major issue over the past couple of months. It's soaring, it's spiralling, and also theft, a number of offences. So they'll just be told you're okay, you just get a quick caution. I mean, that is not only not a deterrent to criminals, it's a nightmare for coppers, isn't it?
Well, let me try and put some flesh on the bones of this story, if I may, please. Cautions have been a thing for a long, long time, unfortunately. It's been part of the drip, drip, drip of, quite frankly, going soft on criminals and allowing them to rule the roost, to control the streets, all of which has happened in the last 20 years or so, with the police retreating away from patrolling the streets because they had to get in cars, because they had to answer all the 999 calls. And then, of course, the police started doing what they were calling screening out of crimes. In other words, giving themselves an excuse to not investigate something. Yeah. And then, of course, we've seen it in recent years really manifest itself in the police not investigating burglaries, car crimes, shoplifting, and all of that. Yep. Well, you and I have had many a conversation over these things. I've been extremely irritated by it. And what's happened now is that the Department of Justice has actually reinforced or beefed up a little bit the rules around cautioning, because the truth of the matter is the police have been too happy to caution people too quickly, too often, and actually the government are saying enough's enough. You will caution, but they've tightened up the rules, so it shouldn't happen as often, it shouldn't happen to so many people, and it shouldn't happen time and time again.
The reason, apparently, is because of course, the huge backlog in the legal system, people waiting 2 years to get to court, which is a nightmare for the defendant and for everyone else.
Yep. Victims, witnesses.
Exactly. And it's because we've got nowhere to put criminals when it comes to prisons. Lack of prison places could apparently, they say, see 1,500 serious criminals avoid jail time over the next 3 years, and prisons will run out of space, they're saying, in 3 years' time, because there's not enough cells. Now, they're apparently building 3 what they call super prisons, all of which they're up in Lancashire, I think, have been held up because they might spoil the environment for badgers. Now, I'm all for animals. You know, I actually quite like the fact that we care about badgers that much, but it doesn't do much for our prison problem, does it? We've got to start getting some prisons built pretty fast, haven't we?
Yes, we have. There are some people that will tell you we can't arrest our way out of this problem or that problem. But really, if we had an entire criminal justice system, and I mean from the start point of the police, there was actually an effective, professional, dedicated, fit crime-fighting organisation, which is what the police ought to be. Unfortunately, it's morphed into let's be friends with everybody, let's dance in the park, let's paint the cars with rainbows, let's get some lip balm, let's do all of that kind of stuff, right?
Dance the Macarena,
Which I don't really think is what the public want, generally speaking.
They don't want this.
I think the public want a lean, effective, and when I say lean, I mean they'd like the officers to be a bit more lean, so they could pass a pretty basic bleep test without whinging about it and tackle. I think that is what the public want, and then if we then had a criminal justice system into which people, once they had been charged, were processed effectively and given a suitable deterrent, not only to deter them from committing future crimes, but deter other people from committing future crimes, then we might just get a grip on the situation. But just bear with me for one more minute, Kev, if you will. You know, I think that we need a Royal Commission on policing. I've been banging on about that for decades.
I agree.
And the reason for that being two things. I think the public have got to make their minds up what sort of police service they want. Do they want an effective crime-fighting service, organisation? Do they want the police to focus on locking up bad people? Or are they quite relaxed about dancing the Macarena, having their house burgled and it not being investigated, losing their car, and then perhaps sending any CCTV that they've got into the police station? That's if you've got a local one, if it hasn't closed. So what do the public want? And I think the Royal Commission would be able to countenance the views of the public. Do they want lean, effective crime-fighting organisation, or do they want something that's reaching out to every minority community in order to be their friends, to make up for the sins of 40 and 50 years ago, which by and large a lot of people have got over anyway? Some haven't, but many have. So what do they want? And then we say to the police, so what do you want to be? Or we say to the police, this is what the public have decided. You now have got to be that organisation to fit the wishes of the public.
I think a lot of these problems date back to when the police stopped calling themselves the police force and started calling themselves, for mysterious reasons, the police service.
Oh, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And that was at the same time that so many senior police officers, and all of them do it now, trundle off to university, get their degrees, come back to policing with their heads full of pseudo-intellectual claptrap, which has no place in policing. It's utterly inappropriate. When the police suddenly decided, well, because so many people didn't like us, we now have to be loved by everybody. An absolute pile of garbage that is, because as police officers, you don't really want to be liked by the criminals, you know, and the mainstream public will like you if you investigate the crimes that they become victims of.
Absolutely. To go back to those prisons, the 3 super prisons being built in Lancashire, Leicestershire and Buckinghamshire will not open before 2027 at the earliest because of planning appeals, one of which is to do with badgers, which could delay progress because they have to evict the animals before they build the prisons. So there's all sorts of problems there. So add that. We haven't got enough prisons, so we haven't got enough cells, so serious criminals will not get jail time. Add that to the fact that we're going to tell a load of criminals it's okay, slap on the wrist, you don't have to go to court. So go back to life from your point of view, Peter. That is a nightmare for coppers, isn't it? Because there's no deterrent there. You know, you can commit all sorts of really serious crimes with next to no punishment. So our justice system is in danger of really falling apart at the seams, isn't it?
Oh, it is falling apart at the seams. And not only is it the police's responsibility, in my view, to make our nation a hostile environment for criminals, it is also incumbent upon the Crown Prosecution Service and the courts to make it a hostile environment by prosecuting effectively and by handing down deterrent sentences. That's what helps to reduce crime. When people have a fear of, number one, getting captured, and number two, being or receiving a stiff punishment, they're good deterrents.
Exactly. And this soft justice, I mean, as I say, the timing of it could be worse. You know, we've been talking for the last week. I think you and I did a slot on it just not so long ago about the spiralling scourge of, you know, mass-scale shoplifting. Yeah. You know, which the Co-op last week described as looting. You know, these people are just walking into shops, stealing on an unprecedented level. So we've come to realise that shoplifting is a very serious crime. It is not victimless. Every time they steal stuff, prices go up for the rest of us. So there we were talking in those terms about the seriousness of shoplifting. It's time to start treating shoplifting as a serious crime. And then the next week, the government comes out and says, oh, well, shoplifting, we'll just give you a caution. That's a minor crime, no big deal. Mixed messages, to say the least.
But people have been receiving cautions for theft shoplifting for years, time and time again. There were stats that came out only a few weeks ago that were showing it could be the 40th or 50th time you have been captured for an offence of theft before you get in front of a court. Now, that is just utterly ludicrous. Where is the deterrent? Crime does pay. That's why so many people commit it.
You couldn't say it worse than that. And what did you think yesterday? This story emerged talking about our soft on crime, soft on the causes of crime government, that they announced a sort of crackdown on shoplifting and mine. They said, in the past you had to be caught 50 times before we considered a custodial sentence. Well, we're getting tough. Yeah. It's going to be 20 now. 20. Got to be caught 20. No more 50, 20. That's not a crackdown.
No, it's maybe a slight tightening of the screw, but it's certainly not a crackdown in any way, shape or form. And what about the shopkeepers, both the man or woman that runs the corner store, their own independent little store, be it a bookshop, a sports shop, a cafe? Look at the large retailers, some of whom have adopted a policy of do not intervene, which of course is catastrophic, and it just invites other thieves back into their stores. What about the staff at the co-op, so many of whom have been traumatised by people with hoods, balaclavas, gloves, sacks, climbing over the perspex screens, ripping them down, helping themselves to cigarettes and alcohol, while terrified shop workers are trapped in that space and can't move. And what kind of police response did they get? Well, the co-op were very vocal last week when they said in aggravated circumstances they didn't get a police response 71% of the time.
And of course, this is shoplifting. As I say, in one breath we say it's very serious. It's becoming more serious by the day. In another breath, the police consider shoplifting, as you've just indicated, to be one of those crimes that's sort of beneath them. It's mine, I can't be bothered. Like burglary, like car theft. It's another one of these crimes, and the number of these crimes seem to rise almost by the day, that the police have decided it's not worth their time to investigate. That this attitude has to be destroyed, doesn't it? The police have to get back to doing their job, and that is, no matter how small the crime, you investigate, you take it seriously. Let's
throw in theft of phones and theft of people's pedal bikes, which is so important to so many people, how they get to work and the such like. But of course, let's just rewind to Saturday. Fiona Hamilton, that esteemed journalist at the Times newspaper, splashed across the front page. The police are going to investigate all of the aforementioned now, so we're all going to be okay. We can all leave our front doors open while we go to the shops, because the police wouldn't possibly lead us down the garden path, would they? They wouldn't say anything misleading or untrue. Surely not. So, in fact, I look forward to the next week's holiday I have, leaving my front door open, because I know that I can come back to my telly and all that kind of stuff.
Sure you can, yeah.
And the crime-free nirvana, this boils down again to what I was saying earlier on. Yeah. Do the police actually want to have a reputation for and actually do investigate crime and lock up bad people relentlessly? Yeah. With, of course, starting with neighbourhood policing, those brilliant cops who've got their ear to the ground. So when a crime of a particular nature occurs, they go, do you know what? We've got a guy who lives on the ground. That sounds just like the sort of crime he'd do. Yeah. And then perhaps you can build up an evidence and an intelligence package and drag him in. And all these kind of things. It is, to a certain extent, reinventing the policing wheel. And finally, it's dawning upon them that that's what they've got to do.
We'll go back to shoplifting. Some shopkeepers have been saying that what the police are now doing, in many cases, instead of investigating themselves, so the shopkeeper phones up and says, I've been robbed, the police send round an investigation kit So they have to take photos, do interviews with people and sort of investigate the crime themselves. Then they send that back to the police. The police then look at it and decide whether or not they'll get involved. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
All of which is true, and all of which just goes to indicate how far the police have to travel if they're going to become an organisation that regains public trust. They come out with great platitudes, flowery language and the such like, but they really, really have got an awful lot of work to do if they are going to reconnect with the moderate mainstream, the people who have their phone, their bikes nicked, their cars stolen, their houses broken into, all of the things that we speak about that affect people, and the police just turn their backs on millions and millions of people. Yeah. If they're going to reinvent, if they're going to go back in some regards to doing what they used to do, wait and see how quickly trust and confidence will return.
And, of course, what the senior cops always say when you and I have a conversation like this, when people say, where are the police? Why aren't they investigating my house burglary? Why aren't they investigating my car getting stolen, shoplifting, etc.? They always say, oh, well, you know, we haven't got enough officers. The government needs to give us, you know, thousands more officers. Well, here's what I would say is, you know, that's probably an argument we can always do with more coppers. But better still, they should reorganise the way coppers work, because I read a statistic the other day that 1 in 4 coppers, 25%, a quarter of all coppers never leave the police station.
Yeah.
They basically do clerical jobs. Also, loads of coppers spending so much time going through Twitter to see if they can find a hate crime. If you stopped all of that nonsense, you know, stop worrying about nasty tweets, stop sitting around in police stations acting like you're office clerks. If you got out there on the road, then we wouldn't have a numbers problem in terms of the police, right?
Yeah, they have to reinvent the organisation to a large degree, reorganise it. But excuse me, you were very, very dismissive when you said clerical terms, because now in policing, of course, these officers behind desks are often on business duties. No. Business? It's policing. Don't package it up with some flowery language to try and make it out to be something it's not. The organisation needs to be focused on policing. And another thing, you know, the Met in particular has a lot of agency staff. I met one of these agency staff not so long ago, an ex-copper who was boosting his pension by working via an agency in a role similar to what he did in the police. And do you know what he disgustingly told me? Yeah. He said, it takes me 2 hours a day to do my work. I spend the next 6 hours of the day trying to look busy. And he thought that was amusing.
It sums it up, doesn't it?
He thought that was amusing. It was as much as I could do to keep my hands in my pockets.
I'll tell you what, Peter, I thought I was the star of the show when it came to getting angry on air, but I've met my match. Peter Bleksley, former Met police detective, brilliant.